I'd like to move to the next issue in what you call a mimbabi aula, a higher order of greetings in the view of some, which is greetings during religious festivities. Every year when it comes to Ramadan, there's always some non-Muslim saying Ramadan Mubarak to you, Happy Ramadan, Merry Eid, Happy Salah, Eid Mubarak. And as a community, you actually like it. You feel good that a non-Muslim is wishing you something good. There's no understanding that, he is becoming a Muslim because of this.
Yeah.
And some Muslims do exactly the same thing. They reciprocate. Merry Christmas and Happy Easter, or depending on the religion that the Muslim community is with. It may be Jewish, Diwali, in places where they have Hindus, etc. Now, some Muslim scholars have understood this to be prohibited, that it is not permissible for a Muslim to say any greetings of Merry Christmas, or, it's viewed as congratulating them on something that is haram, and by so doing you are endorsing or supporting something that is haram. Others see, no, there's a cultural context where it's just a courtesy and it means nothing more than that. So we do find every time Christmas comes along, there's a Muslim asking, is it okay or is it not okay? Scholars definitely differ. Can we understand where the scholars are coming from? Where's this difference of opinion coming from?
It's okay. To start with, Islam as a religion encourages whatever will foster harmonious relationship through being a good neighbor, being kind to your neighbor, respecting their cultures as long as it doesn't violate your religion. All words of kindness and courtesy and respect. And in fact, the Prophet ﷺ, like they said, Kana yakrimu karimul qawm, he honored the great among people. And also, cultural norms are a source of law even in Sharia and interpretations. That is number one. Number two, on the issue of whether you should say Merry Christmas or Happy Easter and all of that, there is no clear text, neither from Quran nor Sunnah, prohibiting it. It's most likely juristic reasoning, scholars' effort of trying to see, okay, what does it mean? So it's good to know this from the beginning. On this note, some scholars say it is permissible. It's just normal. It's not more than reciprocating. Eid Mubarak, Ramadan Mubarak, and you do the same thing. When he said Eid Mubarak, you didn't understand that to mean he's now endorsed Islam, so he is happy with my religion. He's now a Muslim, he's supporting. No. Just neighborliness, hakusuba, You rejoice with him during festivities. So they look at it that it's just as simple as that, and there is nothing wrong with that. Particularly if from the cultural perspective, that is how it is understood to mean. While others go a little further by saying, no, if you say that, and you look at the intent of that festival, and is against your Aqidah as a Muslim, then you are like endorsing him. It's like thumb up for what you're doing. You say God was born on 25th of December. You say God was crucified. You said all of that was raised again. And Quran told us that ma qataluhu wa ma salabuhu. And so why should a Muslim be doing that? So this is their basis for prohibition. They tie the ordinary greeting to ideology and faith, like that has a message relating to their belief. So this is where you can see some scholars taking it so high and serious that no, you can't say that. While others look at it like, man, it doesn't mean anything. It's just a reciprocation. And like, wait first, I will not be fair to my neighbor. When it is my festive period, he say happy, he rejoices with me, he actually sent his children. I can see the joy he's helping me to share and all of that. On what note? I will be morally guilty for no reason, just to refuse to reciprocate when he actually needed it. So this is actually the basis of the two divergent opinions.
So it looks, as you've mentioned, firstly, there is no clear text of the Quran or the Sunnah on this issue of religious ceremonies and greetings. So the differing views are actually a product of ijtihad, juristic reasoning. And from what you are saying, the main juristic tool seems to be qiyas and urf, looking at reasoning by analogy. So some look at the greeting as similar to endorsement, and therefore they view it as endorsement and therefore prohibited. Others look at it as no, it's just courtesy. It has no ideological implication. So they look at it as just other greetings, such as when the non-Muslim greets me, there's no ideological implication in the cultural understanding. And so a combination of both urf and qiyas. Mawlan Nasir, what light could you shed on just how the scholars approach this thing when they differ?
Well, I think most of the jurists, particularly scholars like Hatim, Ibn Arif al-Awani, and many others, would look at it that from the very beginning, this is a premise of permissibility. And as you always know, that in the premise of permissibility, the only exception is possible, or making an exception in this space is only possible by a text that is explicit, or some, mafsada, or something that is harm, that is clear. And that is the point the scholar is making, that it still remains within the space of what is permissible, except if it indicates a pleasure that is identifying with the religion. That is, of course, goes back to the issue of intention, or trying to show sort of an agreement with the tenets of their own religion by doing that. And that is why this space of greetings, this space of interaction, it is a space that is largely influenced by culture and the cultural context and the geographic environment of people. And that is why scholars always encourage interpretation of this kind of things are supposed to be handled by scholars of these particular places, because they know better what is meant in this particular context, in this particular culture, when this particular thing is done. Otherwise, it is still seen from the perspective of permissibility. Now, on this particular subject, what you find is two categories of scholars. While some are going the literal way and trying to look at the linguistic and the literal implication of the greetings and the event that is happening, and connecting it with their own theology, and therefore trying to deduce a theological implication to that issue. Others will look at it from the purely cultural perspective, where in this culture, as you rightly mentioned at the beginning, where if you tilt it the other way, the flip side, if a non-Muslim said Happy Ramadan or Eid Mubarak, does that in any way signifies him identifying with the tenets of your religion, or he is just wishing a friend or a neighbor? So they look at it from that particular angle. And in that, they look at the wordings. What are you even saying? They look at what is coming from your mind. What is the understanding of the culture when you do that? So usually these are the things you find among scholars when it comes to this particular view. Some go cultural, some go literal. And the implication for those who goes literal is that it is not permissible. For those who looked at it from the context of culture and togetherness and friendliness, they look at it as what is the understanding in the culture, and we go by that.
So what you're saying is there's one paradigm that approaches this topic by looking at the words used, Happy Christmas, and taking that linguistic logic to a theological implication. And another group of scholars don't approach it that way. They're looking at the cultural, customary usage and the customary implication as being just a superficial greeting with no theological implications. I'd like us to look more closely at this issue of the prohibition. For those who consider it prohibited, those who look at the logic of the language and give it a theological implication, could you say more on that logic and how it is concluded, and which scholars, for example, what do scholars say on this?
Well, I think the first group that are looking at it from the very literal angle, from their logic is looking at the phrase and the wordings, Happy Christmas. That means you are happy with that. What does Christmas connote? So that is how it begin to graduate to theology. Beyond the issue of interacting, which is quite superficial for most people, they now think deeply over the meaning of the phrase or the wordings. You are happy, you identified with them, and what is the theology for Christians around the idea of Christmas? And that, by implication, means you've agreed with the, with the belief that is tied to this particular celebration, and that, by implication, means you are a non-Muslim. You've left. You are excommunicated from the religion because you believe in these very things like believing about the tenet of Christianity and how they discuss all around that. If you are happy about that, you believe in that. It's just like an qiyas that they usually make with that, with agreeing with it by just saying, "I wish you happy Christmas."
So it's like saying, "I endorse shirk,"
yes,
or "I endorse something that is contrary to my religion." Of course. Alam Ibrahim, what else would you add here?
Yeah, based on this, people coming from this perspective now look at it. If one endorses such festivals and is even rejoicing, it's like he's part of it. And you can't be part of an ideology that is contrary to your faith, that is challenging the unity of God. And so it's more an equation type. You endorse it. You can only endorse it if you are okay with it and all of that. So at that end, they now say, okay, it is haram. This is purely based on theology and whether the person actually has that in mind. I may not be speaking for the person, but to a great extent, it doesn't go beyond courtesy and greeting. It is very rare for any Muslim to do that while greeting, and that is what he actually intended. But if that be it, like they think, possibly that might hold. But let's not forget that all of these are juristic reasoning. It is not a textually thing that is binding. So careful when somebody take it from that perspective and said it is haram. I think the most somebody can do is to say, for this reason, it is not proper for a Muslim to understand it and take it to this extent. But careful taking it further that you are a Muslim. Let's be very careful on some of these superficial things. They are among the things that Boko Haram and others have used to justify shedding blood of innocent Muslims. They assume and conclude and act based on what is just their assumption of somebody's understanding without any proof. Allahu Alam.
And this is, among contemporary and past scholars, I think Ibn Taymiyyah, Bin Baz, Uthaymin, a number of scholars have held this view of saying you shouldn't, it is haram to say Merry Christmas or greet people depending on their religion, their festivities. I'd like us to now move to understanding where, just better, those who consider it permissible. You've mentioned, yes, it is a product of ijtihad, and so people should not do takfir about it. Don't treat it as if it is more than juristic difference. It's not as if God said or the Prophet said. No. Somebody is using their reasoning by analogy, by qiyas, to extrapolate rulings to issues where the Prophet didn't or the Quran didn't comment on. I want to understand better those who are saying it is okay, this issue of the customary usage and that logic, that paradigm. Could you help us understand it better?
Yeah, like we introduced earlier, those that are saying it is permissible are simply saying, culturally, when somebody say, good morning, they are just words that have come to be that we use to exchange pleasantries, acknowledge presence, show respect, recognition to one another. Same thing, good afternoon, Happy Christmas, Ramadan Mubarak. So on that note, before you give it ideological interpretation, you need to know very well, be conversant with the cultural implication and interpretation of those that use it. Okay? If you are not an English person, you can't interpret the meaning of Happy Christmas better. So it's good to ask them from your own culture, what does it mean? When you say Happy Christmas, what does it mean to you? And maybe taking from that perspective, the most appropriate person to address those issues should actually be a scholar from that background. That is one. Two, put yourself in their shoe. How do you feel if somebody say Happy Ramadan, Ramadan Mubarak? It's not about how you feel, but from your religious perspective, does that show that he endorses Ramadan? Not. So to them, it is a mere courtesy, a show of respect, neighborliness, rejoicing with a neighbor or a friend or a brother on what he values or what he sees as a season of celebration and rejoicing. And so on that note, it shouldn't be taken beyond that. It has less or nothing to do with ideological orientation. It is not in any way showing that a Muslim has endorsed the idea of Trinity, God was crucified and resurrected as they do in Easter, or Jesus was God and was born on 25th and all of that. Not really. Because if we take some of these festivals deep down to history, even Christmas, it wasn't originally a religious celebration per se.
Of Christians.
Thank you. It just come to be. Sometimes when you have a predominant culture endorsing a religion, some of their cultural practices find their way into that religion. And we see that even in our own cultures around Nigeria and anywhere, among the Hausas, among the Pakistanis and all of that. So people should understand it from this perspective. And like I say, the best person to address these things should actually be people from that angle. What exactly do you mean by that? So based on this note, there's nothing here to show prohibition. In fact, it is permissible, and in some instances, it will be encouraged to do that if it can foster, harmonious relationship and peaceful coexistence. So this is the logic and the thinking of those that are saying it is permissible. This is the angle they are coming from.
Malan Nasir, what would you add here?
Well, I think there is this important maxim that says, in the presence of a customary meaning, you don't give priority in interpretation or consider the literal meaning. Usually in considering language, we look at meaning and essence, not actually the words and phrases. And therefore, and that is why scholars that are arguing in this direction of culture should be looked at, particularly in this context, are still reminding us of the verse of La yanhakumullahu anil ladhina lam yuqatilukum fid din, because you have to understand the context within which they are coming and what is understood to be the interpretation. And they still argued that you have to go back to the intention. If the intention is really about what that theological implication is, then they all agree it is wrong. If the intention is about, yes, this is what we believe, this is what we meant, then they all agree it's wrong. However, if that is not the intention, then then it has to be given the cultural interpretation that it has. And this opinion, you find a number of scholars like Yusuf al-Qaradawi, like Abdullah bin Bayya, like Mustafa Darga, and many others, Ali Juma, that hold on to this particular opinion. There isn't any disagreement among all the scholars in the event where one is actually wishing with the understanding or the intention that this is what I meant. I align myself with your theology, I agree with all this, and I'm driving pleasure with the religious attachment and inclination, then all of them agree that this is not permissible, this is prohibited. Otherwise, they said you should look at the culture and the norm that is obtainable in that particular society and the meaning that is associated with such greetings.
Because I think, just what you're saying, if you go literally, there are a lot of things we say in language, in English. When you say, for example, you are fired, we understand that to mean dismissed. It's nothing to do with fire. The literal meaning is not what is taken. When somebody says in an auction, going, gone, we know gone means it is sold, not that somebody went anywhere. But also when we look at days and, today it doesn't mean anything because the cultural meaning of Thursday has overtaken its original meaning being Thursday. So it used to be the day of of Thor, the guy with the hammer, who in various mythologies was a god. Woden, the father of Thor, was Woden's Day or Wednesday. And then we have Freya's Day. We have Saturn's Day. But the literal meaning that had theological implications has basically been forgotten. It's non-existent today. Nobody tells you if you say, well, today is the day of worshipping the sun because today is Sunday, or yesterday was Saturn's Day, or let's meet on Thursday. You're not endorsing that. Like, we have moved so much into the customary meaning that the theological, these religions have basically disappeared now, but we're left with the words that were used. Holy days. When we say holiday now, it's got nothing to do with religion and holiness. There's nothing holy about a holiday anymore. And so this idea that the customary meaning is what some people hold on to. What does it mean in our own context? And if you are not from that context, if you've not been brought up to understand the nuance of the cultural meaning, then it is easy to go with the literal meaning that then is taken into having a theological implication. And I guess why it is important to understand the context in which a statement is made, and to understand the culture and the custom of the people. If you don't come from that custom, if you don't when a couple said, you know what, yeah, we're done. In that context, it's understood to mean we are divorced. For somebody, done with what? The sentence is not yet even complete. So the need to really understand the cultural nuance that is associated with greetings in certain contexts, and of course, because you have been brought up with a particular paradigm, not another one, not a particular cultural sensitivity that is not your own, it is actually more difficult. You need effort and analogies to understand where each one is coming from and why somebody is making such a big deal about the literal meaning that goes to a logical, theological implication, which somebody is like, where are you coming from? And the other person who is like, where are you coming from? It has a very clear logical implication. But as you've, I think, explicitly made clear, scholars differ because there is no explicit statement in the Quran or the Sunnah. This is a product of ijtihad, of juristic reasoning, especially looking at custom or urf or culture, and the kind of qiyas, reasoning by analogy, that the scholars use. And they differ, as they differ on many other issues. And the need for us to, as you've mentioned, look at the context. Where there's a difference of opinion, you can hold on to any opinion you are more comfortable with, but also think of the consequences in your own context. Is this something that could douse tension, or is it something that could raise tension, and not just treat scholarly differences as if they don't give us flexibility in realizing the higher intents and objectives of Sharia in a particular context. It's scholars that are differing. It's a fiqh difference, not Allah holding on to one opinion and somebody. So the need to, even if you will not say Merry Christmas, you may have other greetings that are good. Happy holiday, if you're comfortable with saying that. Season greetings, some people feel more comfortable with that. But others will say, well, it all means the same thing. It's the Christmas season, not whatever. But again, scholars differ, and may Allah continue to guide us all. Thank you so much for your contributions. Jazakumullahu khairan. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Amen.